Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the November 14th, 2017 meeting of the Old Town Planning Board to order. We need to approve the minutes, but we don't have any. There's still don't get transcripts, Dave?
No, what we found out is anything over 2 hours will not upload on the website. Planning board meetings have been going through, but anything that goes over 2 hours, they are on the closed circuit TV, and we have discs available for anybody that needs
Okay.
them.
So then there's no need for a motion to approve minutes then because they
Correct.
are they're on the site. Item 3 is a public meeting for the Newsme BGS Juniper Ridge landfill expansion located at 2828 Benneck Road, Old Town, Maine, tax map 3, lot 1, case number 1529E. The purpose of this meeting is to deliberate and prepare findings of facts regarding the Newsme BGS application for expansion of the Juniper Ridge landfill under the City of Old Town's Chapter 24 Solid Waste Facilities Ordinance Criteria. Mr. Katsiafikas, you wanted to bring us up to date with what you've added?
Certainly. I had sent out a version which was put on the city's website. Pierce Atwood, through Tom Doyle, had put together some proposed changes shown in red line form on the website. I've reviewed those, and those are all acceptable changes. They complete with regard to some of the materials that were submitted, and they flesh out some of the criteria, so I think it was helpful to have someone else take a second look at that, and I'd recommend that the board work from the Pierce Atwood red line as your basis. And the two things I would add is that there have been 2 filings since then, and so my final decision form, which is based on the Pierce Atwood red line, has the email from Cheryl Spencer to David Russell, October 30, with comments from Ed Spencer, and then Tom Doyle's response to David Russell with regard to those comments. So those are 2 things that have come in since all of these findings were prepared. I've added them to the final decision for this form.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to just poll the members of the board. Have you all read the materials from this meeting and from previous meetings? I know any questions about the material? You've read through it all?
Read through it.
No questions.
Okay.
No questions.
No
All right.
questions.
Okay, and just for the record, Ms. Washburn was absent at the last meeting, but
I
she's
was.
had a chance to review material
Yep,
since
yep,
then?
yep.
Okay, is there any objection from anyone from her participating this evening? Okay, then thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, the process will be to go through that. Of course, as you all know, or some of you weren't here, may know that we have had numerous meetings regarding this and public hearings, and we are now at the point where we are going to go through the decision, and it is a written decision that has been prepared based on all of the hearings, the testimony, the questions, and comments from the board and from members of the public, as well as the major proponents and major opponents of this application. So those are all prepared by Mr. Katsiafikas, enclosed in this decision form. The public hearing is closed. Our purpose this evening will be to read down through these and vote on each of the findings. And if any member of the board has any questions of someone in the audience, then please notify the chair. We will recognize them for that only, but we're not going to get into accepting any further testimony on this. We're going to go down through and vote on each of the findings of fact. Is that without objection? We'll continue. Okay. To begin with, we'll start with financial and technical capacity. The applicants have demonstrated financial and technical capacity to design, construct, and operate and close the solid waste facility and expansion in accordance with the requirements of this chapter and the MDEP license. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 21, 52 to 53, supporting and testimony that the applicants' ongoing operations are generating tipping fee revenue finance improvements at JRL that Casella has presented in Appendix F1, a letter from America, N.A., that demonstrates the availability of a credit facility for the expansion, and Casella has presented evidence of a financial assurance for closure and post-closure care of the facility at Appendix F2, and in the August 11th, 2017 letter from Tony King to Kathy regarding the financial assurance. Thus, the planning board concludes that the applicants demonstrated financial capacity as required by Chapter 24-12A. The planning board finds from the application, pages 21 through 24, 52 through 53, Appendix C2 with key personnel resumes from testimony and from the experience meeting with Newsme at the facility, that the applicants have a trained staff, 3 of whom are certified by the Solid Waste Association of North America as manager of landfill operations, and knowledgeable consultants, which together with Casella's operation of landfills generally, Newsme's operation of JRL since 2004, and Newsme's proposed use in the expansion of a double liner system, convinced the planning board that the applicants have demonstrated technical capacity as required by 24-12A. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the findings that I've just presented.
I'll make a motion that those findings be approved as you have just read.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Moving on to item B, traffic. The applicants have made adequate provisions for safe and uncongested traffic movement of all types into, out of, and within the proposed solid waste facility and expansion. The haul routes within the city will safely accommodate the number, weight, and types of vehicles transporting waste to and from the facility and expansion. The applicants have developed a plan meeting the requirements of 24-8D of the ordinance regarding overweight vehicles and has agreed to implement that plan. Vehicles transporting solid waste also will be licensed by the city in accordance with its requirements when enacted for licensing solid waste haulers. The entrance and exit design of the solid waste facility and expansion will provide safe sight distances in all directions and provides for safe turning. Necessary improvements to roads or intersections will be completed prior to the initial operation of the facility and expansion, or beginning operations pursuant to a permit amendment, or permit renewal, unless an alternative schedule is approved by the city. Major facility and expansion roadways will allow continuous and uninterrupted traffic movement without causing traffic back up onto city streets, posing a danger to pedestrians or other vehicles, and will provide safe access for city public safety personnel and vehicles. The applicants have developed a plan to minimize litter and nuisance odor from trucks and vehicles used to transport solid waste to or leachate from the facility and expansion, and has agreed to implement that plan. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 25 through 29, 50 through 54, 53 through 54, supporting materials and testimony that 1, the applicant's primary haul route for the expansion will remain the same, I-95 to Route 16 west to the JRL access road, that Gorilla Palmer's traffic study, Appendix D4, shows that there will be an increase of 3 a.m. hour, 3 p.m. hour, and 20 daily trip ends with these roads, in the opinion of the traffic engineer, Tom Gorel, can safely accommodate. And MDOT's state traffic engineer stated that he saw no negative traffic impacts with the expansion, Appendix D4-B. Newsme has a policy to discourage overweight vehicles, Appendix D4-C, and implements that policy. 3, that Gorilla Palmer traffic study, Appendix D4, establishes a minimum sight distance of 540 feet for significant truck travel, and demonstrates that sight distances to the east and west exceed 1,000 feet, both the road and the truck's transporter policy, Appendix D4C, provide for safe turning, and there have been no accidents to date at the facility entrance exit. 4, MDOT has added preservation paving and highway rehabilitation work to its 2018 work plan to improve the northern portion of Benneck Road. 5, the existing roadway will provide access to the facility for the existing landfill, and the expansion will allow for continuous and uninterrupted traffic movements on the streets that can accommodate that traffic according to the Gorel-Palmer Traffic Study, Appendix D4. 6, after discussions with the city, NewsMe has installed 2 signs, one on the access road and another on the site exit, encouraging truckers to use I-95. NewsMe's truck transporter policy includes a plan to reduce litter escaping from trucks and to minimize odor from trucks and vehicles by properly washing and cleaning residue and deodorization. Therefore, the planning board concludes that applicants have made adequate provision for safe and uncongested traffic movement of all types into, out of, and within the proposed facility, and have satisfied requirements of Chapter 24-12B. Any discussion? I ask for a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the findings as read.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Utilities. The applicants have made provisions for utilities to furnish service at the required design usage. Findings. The planning board finds that from the application, pages 29 and 54 through 55, supporting materials and testimony, particularly from Appendix D-10, that the facility and expansion will use the existing sanitary wastewater disposal systems, that upon relocation of the scales and office building, these will be served by a well and on-site disposal system to be designed, that existing water sources will supply the expansion, that leachate generated by the expansion will be treated at the MFGR LLC, formerly Old Town Mill, or City of Brewer Wastewater Treatment Plant, Appendix D-10, and that the expansion will have sufficient electrical service from an existing line that will be relocated. Therefore, the planning board concludes that the applicants have made sufficient provisions for utility service for the expansion.
Make a motion that we accept the findings.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? D, fugitive dust and nuisance odors. The applicants have made adequate provisions for the control of fugitive dust and nuisance odors so that the solid waste facility will not unreasonably adversely affect air quality beyond its boundaries. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 29 through 35 and 55 through 56, supporting materials and testimony, that NewsMe is addressing the 3 possible sources of odor from the facility and expansion. 1 is incoming waste, by limiting the application to the smallest possible area, by adding daily cover, by spraying trucks with deodorizer, by tarping trucks until wastes are removed, and by using a mobile deodorizing spray. Leachate storage and transport, by sealing and cleaning vehicles, and 3, landfill-related gases, by collecting and flaring these gases. While the planning board has received evidence that odors from the facility are a concern to certain neighbors, particularly at Route 16 and West Coley Road, but not on Route 43, the number of odor complaints has trended downward during the NewsMe's operation of the facility. Application Figure 4. Dan Thornton testified that he is on contract with NewsMe to respond to odors and has only been called out 3 times per year. I would like to add a personal experience that I had last week. I detected an odor when I went by on Route 43. I couldn't remember the complaint number, so I called, and Jeremy Lab called me back and confirmed that indeed there was an odor and what they were doing to fix it. That is the type of response that Old Town expects through Chapter 24 and is required, and was satisfactory to me. Applicants have provided a method for detecting, monitoring, and measuring odors in the Appendix D3 Operations Manual. This includes 4 off-site continuous stationary hydrogen sulfide monitors and a nasal Ranger olfactometer to measure levels in the field. Applicants also have agreed to incorporate the recommendations of the city's consulting engineer, CES Incorporated, to require Newsme to report on its monthly status, report, H2S levels that exceed 15 parts per billion, and to report to the city's code enforcement officer if the H2S levels exceed 30 parts per billion. In addition, the applicants have agreed to provide continuous H2S monitoring data to the city so that it can review long-term H2S exposure levels. The planning board also finds from the application, pages 34 and 35 and 56, and supporting materials that fugitive dust is controlled through paving of the primary access road and use of appropriate dust control measures on internal roads. JRL operates under an air license issued by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. Therefore, the planning board concludes that the applicants have met the Chapter 24-12D requirements. This is certainly the testimony we received from the public. This is one of the biggest concerns, and we certainly, I think, would expect Newsme and Juniper Ridge to continue to respond to complaints and to control odors as they have. So that's my feeling on it. Any other comments from the board? Would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I make a motion to accept the findings.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Litter control. The applicants have made adequate provisions for control of litter, routine maintenance, and general cleanliness of the entire facility and expansion site. Findings. The planning board finds, on the basis of the application, pages 35 and 36, supporting materials and testimony, and from its observation of Newsme's practices for controlling litter at the facility in its application of daily cover at the end of each workday, its use of litter fences, and its litter patrols for facility cleanup, and applicant statements that they will continue these practices for the expansion, that they have made adequate provision for control of litter, routine maintenance, and general cleanliness of the facility and expansion site. Therefore, the planning board concludes that the applicants have met the standards of Chapter 24-12E. Any further discussion?
I'll make a, oh,
I was gonna say, for your purposes of the record, up above where it says pages 35, you said 35 and 36, and it's page 35 and 56.
56, thank you
Okay.
for correcting me.
I'll make a motion to approve litter control findings.
Second that motion.
We have motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Vector and bird control. Applicants have made adequate provisions for minimizing disease vectors on the site and have developed an effective bird control plan to protect human health. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 35 and 57, supporting materials and testimony, and particularly Appendix D-3, that the applicants have controlled vectors by providing for daily cover application, by contracting with Modern Pest Control, and have a federal permit for bird control, and so concludes the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12F. Any further discussion?
Make a motion to accept the findings.
I'll make a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Waste characteristics. The applicants have developed and will implement a hazardous waste and special waste handling and exclusion plan under the Maine Solid Waste Management Rules to detect, identify, handle, store, and transport special and hazardous wastes. The applicants have demonstrated the ability to comply with MDEP requirements regarding the handlings of solid waste and the storage, handling, and transportation and disposal of leachate. Findings. The planning board finds that the application, pages, looks like 36 through 38, 57 through 58, supporting materials and testimony, that the applicants have a hazardous waste and special waste handling and exclusion plan for the facility and expansion in the operations manual, Appendix D-3 and Appendix D-2, and Appendix G, leachate quality waste characterization plan to identify, store, handle, transport, and dispose of hazardous and special waste and leachate. That the city cannot be more strict than state requirements for this plan, which the Board of Environmental Protection has approved, and therefore concludes that applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12G. Any discussion?
Make a motion, we accept the findings.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Noise. The solid waste facility and expansion will not generate excessive noise at the property boundary or at any protected location as demonstrated by compliance with the following. 1. Sound limit levels. The hourly sound levels from routine operation of a solid waste facility will be less than or equal to 75 decibels for daytime and nighttime hours at the facility property boundary, 60 decibels for daytime hours and 50 decibels for nighttime hours at any protected location in an area for which the zoning or the existing uses are not predominantly commercial or industrial, or 70 decibels for daytime hours and 60 decibels for nighttime hours in an area for which the zoning of existing uses are predominantly commercial or industrial. Alternative levels. If the applicants choose to demonstrate by measurement that the daytime or nighttime pre-development ambient sound environment at any protected location exceeds the daytime or nighttime limits above by at least 5 decibels, then the daytime or nighttime limits are 5 decibels more than the measured daytime or nighttime pre-development ambient hourly sound level at the location of the measurement for the corresponding time period. Jim, can you help me with that?
If it's louder than if in the alternative, if you've got really loud background sounds and they exceed these targets by more than 5 dB, then you get to add that on. But that's only for very loud settings. That's how I interpret that. And
Yeah, it mirrors the state law.
yeah,
Okay. Okay, I just needed a little help with that one. Existing facilities. For any protected location near an existing solid waste facility, the hourly sound level limit for routine operation of the existing facility and all future expansions of that facility is the hourly sound level written above or at the applicant's selection, the existing hourly sound level from routine operation of the facility before any expansions plus 3 decibels. Equipment used during construction and maintenance activities at the solid waste facility and expansion will comply with all applicable state and federal noise regulations and include environmental noise control devices in proper working condition and maintained as originally provided with the equipment by its manufacturer. Sounds associated with the following are exempt from the sound limits of this section. Routine engine sounds from registered and inspected motor vehicles with properly installed and maintained muffler systems as required by 29-A MRSA 1912. While operating on public roadways, or while entering the facility to make a delivery or pickup, and that are moving, starting, or stopping, but not when they are parked with the engine running at the facility. The unamplified human voice and other sounds of natural origin, emergency maintenance and repairs, facility of the vehicle warning signals and alarms as used in appropriate circumstances, safety and protective devices installed with accordance with the device's installation instructions, test operations of emergency equipment occurring in the daytime and no more frequently than once per week, major concrete pours that must extend after 7 p.m. when started before 3 p.m., snow removal, landscaping, and street sweeping activities, sound from a regulated development received at a protected location when the generator of the sound has been conveyed a noise easement for that location. This exemption shall only be for the specific noise, land, and term covered by that easement. Findings. The Planning Board finds from the application pages 39 through 43 and 58 through 59 supporting materials and testimony that The applicants have provided a sound level assessment report by Epsilon Associates, Appendix D-7, that modeled existing facility sound levels, measured noise sources at the facility, and used computer modeling to predict future sound and noise levels associated with the expansion. And using the most conservative assumptions that most of the equipment is running at full power simultaneously, the expansion would meet the noise standards and sound level limits of Chapter 24-12H, with the restriction that the operation of equipment during nighttime hours from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. within 60 feet of the solid waste boundary along western sides of the expansion in cells 14, 15, and 16, operating equipment must be limited to equipment with a combined sound pressure level of 77 decibels or less at 50 feet. We did receive testimony also that noted that they had changed the backup alarms, they're using belly dumps, which has mitigated a lot of the noise that we had experienced previous to that. Would like to ask for a motion or questions at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the findings as you have prepared and read.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Air quality. The applicants have made adequate provisions to avoid unreasonable adverse impacts on air quality, including unreasonable adverse impacts from landfill gases, and for monitoring landfill gases and reporting any management activities undertaken. The applicants have developed adequate methods and/or systems to handle, place, and address nuisance odor-producing materials and processes, including enclosure of nuisance odor-producing materials and processes, and the use of technology to control, reduce, or eliminate odors from the facility and expansion. Our findings are: the planning board finds that the application, pages 43 through 44 and 59, supporting and testimony that applicants propose to continue in the expansion the same methods they have been using to avoid unreasonable air impacts on air quality by collecting and flaring landfill under their DEP air emission license, Appendix D-8, and by addressing nuisance odor causing processes, see findings in paragraph I-D above, and therefore concludes that they have met the requirements of Old Town's Chapter 24-12, Section I.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings.
I'll make a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? Okay. Liability insurance. The applicants accept if the applicant is a public entity. What do you mean by that, Jim?
This is the standard that if it's a public entity, then they have to show that they have adequate requirements by going along with the DEP license requirements, and they've gone along with the DEP license compliance requirements.
Are you
and
making a
complying with
distinction
them.
between Casella and the state as an owner?
No, the applicant in this, well, okay, yeah, NewsMe itself has to show that it has coverage, but the state itself has its own, is self-insured for liability.
Okay,
So
so that's what that means.
So we're trying to make sure that NewsMe has, that's correct, NewsMe/Casella has the appropriate insurance, and you'll see from the draft findings that it has demonstrated it has liability coverage in the materials that were submitted.
Okay, so that they basically, they have demonstrated that they have adequate liability insurance for construction, operation, closure, and post-closure monitoring and maintenance at the facility and expansion by complying with MDEP license requirements, the requirements of this chapter, and the following. 1, all liability insurance policies contain the required endorsements. I'm assuming that means Old Town, as well as others. Policies provide that the bankruptcy or insolvency of the insured does not relieve the insurer of its obligation under the policy. 3, if a liability insurance policy is written as a claims-made policy, an endorsement provides for a discovery period of at least 12 months beyond the date of expiration or cancellation of the policy. The endorsement also provides that the underwriter will notify the public according to the requirements below. A, at least 60 days prior to the date upon which the policy will expire or be canceled, written notification shall be given to all abutters and to the CEO, the code enforcement officer, that insurance for the solid waste facility will expire or be canceled. The notification shall include the date of the expiration or cancellation, the fact that claims against the insured must be filed within 12 months from the date of expiration or cancellation, and shall specify where and how to file claims. During the first, third, sixth, and 9 months subsequent to the date of expiration or cancellation, the underwriter shall place in the Bangor Daily News and the Penobscot Times an advertisement designed to attract notice and containing the information specified in paragraphs 3A above. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 44 through 45 and 59 through 60, supporting materials and testimony, that NewsMe has demonstrated it has adequate liability insurance for the facility, Appendix G, and has posted a surety bond for closure and post-closure monitoring and maintenance costs. As a state-owned facility, the facility is exempt from DEP liability insurance regulations. The underwriter will provide written notice to the city, but because the underwriter cannot provide written notice to abutters and publish notice to the public, NewsMe requests a waiver to allow NewsMe to do so. Therefore, subject to the grant of the requested waiver, the planning board concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12J. And are we voting on that waiver or later?
We'll vote on the waiver later.
That's right. Okay. So pursuant to that, with that understanding, ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? I'm earning that coffee, Jim.
You certainly are, sir.
Existing uses and scenic character. The applicants have made adequate provision for fitting the solid waste facility or expansion into the existing natural environment, and the solid waste facility or expansion will not unreasonably adversely affect existing uses of surrounding and neighboring property, scenic character, or other natural resources. Specifically, the facility or expansion may not present a bird hazard to aircraft, have an unreasonable adverse effect on the preservation of historical sites, unreasonably interfere with views from established public viewing areas, generate excessive noise at the property boundary or at any protected location, or unreasonably adversely affect existing uses of property neighboring the proposed solid waste facility or expansion. In determining whether the proposed solid waste facility or expansion will have an unreasonable adverse effect on the scenic character of the surrounding area, the planning board shall consider all relevant evidence to that effect, such as evidence that the design of the proposed solid waste facility or expansion takes into account the scenic character of the surrounding area. 2, a solid waste facility or expansion which is not in keeping with the surrounding scenic character will be located, designed, and landscaped to minimize its visual impact to the fullest extent possible. 3, that structures will be designed and landscaped to minimize their visual impact on the surrounding area. Findings. The planning board finds from the application pages 45 through 48, 61 through 62, supporting materials and testimony, and on the basis of the visual assessment conducted by SMRT Architects and Engineers, Appendix D-6, that there are no public viewing areas within feet of the property boundary. Was there supposed to be a number there?
There should be within 2,000 feet.
There is no number in my.
Okay,
in mine.
there should be.
2,000 feet
Yes,
is the correct distance
yes.
of the property boundary of the facility, that the facility and expansion may be roads such as Route 16 intermittently, I-95 southbound screened by roadside vegetation at distance, and Route 43 screened by trees previously planted by NewsMe as a visual and based on Appendix E-3. What are you looking for?
No, I just did some of the, that was.
It's right there, but
concern, yeah,
you didn't have it in here,
okay.
in the marked one, that's all. Okay, so, all right, we got it. Oh, now, where was I? Okay.
Green by trees
Fourth line from the
previously.
bottom.
Appendix
Yeah.
D5.
Appendix, right, okay. D5, Agency Natural Resources and Santax Rare Threatened and Endangered Species Report, Appendix D-7, Sound Level Assessment Report, and other materials and testimony, therefore concludes that the expansion will not have an unreasonable adverse effect on the scenic character of the surrounding area, and that there will be no bird hazard to aircraft, unreasonable adverse effect on preservation of historical sites, no excessive noise at the boundary or a protected location, and no unreasonable adverse effect upon existing uses of property neighboring the facility or expansion, and that applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12K.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings as you've read with the inserted 2,000 feet designation.
Make a second
Okay, with that stipulation,
with that stipulation of 2,000 feet.
all in favor? None opposed. Water quality. A solid waste facility or expansion will not cause an unreasonable adverse effect on the surface water quality and will pose no unreasonable risk that a discharge to a significant groundwater aquifer will occur. The applicants have demonstrated that they will comply with the state and federal permit requirements governing groundwater and surface water quality. Findings. The planning board finds that the application, from the application, pages 49 through 50 and 62 through 63, supporting materials and testimony that the applicant's proposed double liner designed for the expansion will collect water that comes in contact with landfill waste. That collected leachate will be transported to a licensed wastewater treatment plant for treatment. That engineers from CV and Mahar have testified and provided supporting documentation that the expansion will not pose an unreasonable risk of discharge to groundwater or surface water. That no significant sand and gravel groundwater aquifer is under the site as shown by Maine Geological Survey maps. And that the level of organic compounds detected in monitoring wells at the facility is very low, and that leachate generated at the facility is collected and transported to a wastewater treatment plant licensed by DEP to accept the facility's leachate. Therefore, the planning board concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12L, which cannot be any stricter than state requirements.
Make a motion to accept that finding as you have read.
The second one.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Compliance record. The applicants have demonstrated compliance with the requirements of the Maine Solid Waste Management Rules, 12 criminal or civil records, by receipt of an MDEP license for the facility and compliance with any conditions imposed under those standards by the MDEP. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 50 and 63, supporting materials and testimony that the applicants have provided civil and criminal disclosure statements and ownership information in Appendix I, and the August 2, 2017 letter from Michael Booth with July 31 BGS disclosure statement, and concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12M.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings.
Make a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. N, Environmental Monitoring Program. The applicants have demonstrated that the proposed environmental monitoring program for the solid waste facility or expansion will comply with the applicable state and federal permit requirements governing monitoring requirements. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 50 and 63, supporting materials and testimony that the applicants have prepared an environmental monitoring plan, Appendix J, for the expansion that identifies monitoring locations, methodology, parameters, and frequency, as required by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection solid waste license, and have presented monitoring requirements of the air emission license, Appendix D-8, and the multi-sector general permit, Appendix D-9, that the applicants have numerous redundant systems to monitor potential liner leaks and ground and surface water impacts, and that applicants have adopted CES Incorporated's H2S reporting recommendations, and therefore concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12N.
Make a motion that we accept the findings as you have read.
I'll make a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Hours of operation. The hours of operation of the solid waste facility and expansion will not unreasonably adversely impact on neighboring properties, especially residential uses. Findings. The planning board finds from the application, pages 51 and 64, supporting materials and testimony that the facility's general hours of operation from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, with 24-hour per day incinerator ash disposal by PERC, are not inconsistent with the residential and other uses of neighboring properties, and so concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12, Section O.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings.
Make a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Applicable ordinances. The solid waste facility and expansion satisfies all of the applicable requirements of Chapter 24 and other applicable city ordinances. Findings. The planning board notes the code enforcement officer's observation that any new building, such as the proposed relocation of the gatehouse and scales, may require planning board site plan review, and repeats the code enforcement officer's statement that the expansion exceeds the 300-foot setback from the toe of the landfill, and therefore concludes that the applicants have met the requirements of Chapter 24-12, Section P.
Make a motion that we accept the findings as you've read.
I'll second.
Motion and have motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? All right, now we are going to look at the waiver requests. We have a total of two. As to all Chapter 24, subsection 24-12 standards. As to the application's compliance with each of the review standards in 24-12, Dennis St. Peter, practicing engineer, president of CES Incorporated, testified that a team of CES engineers and scientists reviewed the application on behalf and employed by the city, and that it meets all of the review standards of state law and Chapter 24. Finally, with regard to Chapter 24 standards applied by the Planning Board, the Planning Board observes that under state law, Resolves 2003 C-93, the Chapter 24 standards cannot be more strict than those contained in the Site Location of Development Act, Natural Resources Protection Act, and Solid Waste Management Act and rules thereunder, and the Maine Board of Environmental Protection, applying those laws and regulations to this application, determined on June 1, 2017, that the applicants met those state law standards. 2, waivers, 24-10. Applicants have requested the following waivers for specific sections of the ordinance, which the Planning Board has granted for reasons that follow. Waiver request number 1, applicant requests a waiver from Article 3, Section 24-8-F.4 of the ordinance that provides that ASTM E679-91 standard practice for determination of odor and taste thresholds by a forced choice ascending concentration series method of limits, current edition, published October 1991, shall be used for guidance on the detection, measurement, and control of nuisance odors, and is adopted by reference. Applicant observes that the cited ASTM standard has been updated in 2004 and now is ASTM E679-04, and requests approval to use the current in-place approaches at the facility to detect and measure potential nuisance odors as described in Section D, Article 3, Section 24-8-F.4 of the application. These approaches include the use of 4 stationary hydrogen sulfide monitor units and/or the handheld portable nasal ranger field olfactometer to quantify odor concentrations at the site. Applicants assert that these practices are at least as effective as ASTM E679-91 for guidance on the detection, measurement, and control of nuisance odors as the ordinance requires. Findings. The Planning Board finds that it is appropriate for applicants to use the improved in-place approaches for detecting and measuring odors, and that the applicants have affirmatively demonstrated that use of these practices will comply with the purpose and intent of Chapter 24-10, and so grant the requested waiver related to the facility and expansion operations. Okay, so, for waivers related to operation, the applicant has affirmatively demonstrated the solid waste facility or expansion will not contaminate any waters of the state, contaminate the ambient air, constitute a hazard to health and welfare, or create a nuisance, and that the proposed operation will comply with the purpose and intent of the chapter despite that waiver. So we are asking for a motion to grant the waiver as read.
I'll make a motion to grant that waiver as read.
I'll make a second to grant the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Waiver request number 2. Article 4, Section 24-12-J.3 of the ordinance, which requires that the liability insurance underwriter to provide notice of termination or expiration to abutters and by publication in the Bangor Daily News. Underwriters have told the applicants that the underwriters lack the capability to provide these notices, but that they will notify the city since it will be an additional insured on those policies. Applicants request that NewsMe, rather than the underwriters, be named as the entity responsible to provide the abutter and publish notices required by Article 4, Section 24-12-J.3A and B, respectively. The Planning Board finds that the applicant NewsMe has shown that its liability underwriter will not provide the abutter and public notice set out in 24-12J.3, and that the applicants have affirmatively demonstrated that NewsMe's proposal to itself provide that notice will comply with the purpose and intent of that section, and so grant the requested waiver related to the facility and expansion operation. The applicant has affirmatively demonstrated the solid waste facility or expansion will not contaminate any waters of the state, contaminate the ambient air, constitute a hazard to health and welfare, or create a nuisance, and that the proposed operation will comply with the purpose and intent of this chapter despite the waiver. Would ask for a motion to approve this waiver.
I'll make a motion to approve the waiver as read.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Number 3, terms of a solid waste facility permit, 24-13. The Planning Board issues this solid waste facility permit to the applicants, the permit holder, upon issuance of a permit hereunder, subject to the following terms stated in the ordinance. A, this solid waste facility permit shall remain in effect unless amended, revoked, or suspended. The permit holder shall at all times comply with applicable operating, monitoring, and reporting requirements, including the annual reporting requirements, other permit conditions. B, approval to construct, alter, expand, or close a solid waste facility shall not relieve the permit holder of the responsibility to comply fully with the applicable provisions of all other parts of Chapter 24, other applicable city ordinances, or state or federal law. C, the permit holder shall have a continuing duty to provide copies of all amended, modified, or renewed federal and state solid waste or other pollution control permits, permit amendments, approvals, and licenses. The permit holder shall have a continuing duty to inform the city promptly in writing of any requested amendments, minor revisions, or modification, as well as any notices of actual or threatened suspension or revocation of any federal or state permits, approvals, and licenses, and any communication from any federal or state official or agency alleging noncompliance with any ordinance, statute, regulation, permit, approval, or license conditions thereof. 4, standard conditions of approval of a solid waste facility permit, 24-14. Planning Board issues this solid waste facility permit subject to the following standard conditions of approval stated in the ordinance. A, employees and authorized representatives of the city shall be allowed access to the premises of the permit holder during normal business and operating times, and at such other times as the city deems necessary to perform such tests and inspections as the city deems necessary, and to examine all records, including monitoring and test results relating to compliance with the permit and this chapter. Approval to construct a facility or expansion thereof shall expire if substantial construction of the first cell of the facility or expansion is not commenced within 3 years after a solid waste facility permit is issued, or within such period as is specified in the MDEP license for the same, unless a request for an extension is granted. Request for extension shall state the reasons why development did not begin within the time specified in the permit, and the reasons why the permit holder would be able to begin activity within 3 years from the granting of a permit. If a permit expires, the permit holder may reapply to the Planning Board for a new approval, but may not begin construction or operation of the solid waste facility or expansion without a valid permit. Reapplication for approvals may include by reference information submitted in the initial application, provided that such information is updated as needed to ensure it remains current. Reapplication shall be subject to any new or revised ordinances adopted or amended by the city. C, the granting of a permit is based upon reports, specifications, and plans contained in the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed by the permit holder during the application process. Any variation from these plans, reports, specifications, and supporting documents is subject to review and approval as a permit amendment prior to implementation. D, the permit holder shall secure and comply with all applicable federal, state, and local laws, licenses, permits, authorizations, conditions, agreements, and orders prior to and during construction, operation and closure of the solid waste facility or expansion. The permit holder shall submit all reports and information reasonably requested by the city demonstrating that the permit holder has complied or will comply with all terms and conditions of the solid waste facility permit. The permit holder shall demonstrate that pre-construction terms and conditions of the solid waste facility permit and of Chapter 24 are met before construction may begin. F, no permit holder shall knowingly hire as an officer, director, or supervisory or key employee any person having been found guilty of a felony or of a violation of environmental laws or rules, or knowingly allow any such person to acquire an equity interest or debt liability interest in the solid waste facility or expansion without first obtaining written permission from the city. Copy of the solid waste facility permit must be included in all contract bid specifications for the solid waste facility or expansion. A copy, okay, got that. H, the permit holder shall maintain a complaint log, which shall identify at least the date and time of each complaint, the type and nature of the complaint, the person or persons making the complaint, including the person's address and telephone number, the method by which the complaint was received, wind direction and speed at the time of the complaint, the MDEP or facility person receiving the complaint, the date and time a site visit was conducted to confirm the type and nature of the complaint, the date and time of the permit holder responded to the complaint, and a summary of any actions taken to resolve the complaint. The permit holder shall submit a copy of the complaint log for the preceding calendar quarter to the CEO within 15 days following the end of the quarter. The permit holder shall maintain a material inventory log identifying the generator, transporter, quantity delivered, usually in tons, waste description, main manifest number, main county, and date for all material delivered to the facility and expansion. The permit holder shall submit a summary of the material inventory log for the preceding calendar quarter to the CEO within 15 days following the end of the quarter. J, the permit holder shall be jointly and severally responsible for compliance with the permit terms and all city ordinances. K, the permit holder shall institute reasonable procedures and employ its best efforts to implement those procedures to require that any person operating a vehicle transporting solid waste or leachate to or from the facility and expansion shall have a current and valid waste hauler's license from the city when and if such license is required by the city, and that solid waste shall be transported to and leachate waste transported from the facility and expansion in completely enclosed containers or vehicles to prevent litter or spillage on city streets and the release of nuisance orders during transport. L, the permit holder shall maintain an overweight truck log, which shall identify by day each overweight vehicle and set forth at a minimum main manifest number, quantity of waste delivered, usually in tons, truck number, waste descriptions, and source, and summarize warnings or other action taken. The permit holder shall submit a copy of the overweight truck log for the preceding calendar quarter to the CEO within 30 days of the end of the quarter. M, failure to comply with the terms of a solid waste permit, facility permit, including but not limited to these standard conditions of any special conditions imposed, and any special conditions imposed, shall be considered a violation of this permit and of this chapter. The permit holder shall notify the CEO within 24 hours of being informed of or receiving a notice of violation at the facility and expansion by the MDEP or any federal agency. The permit holder shall take immediate measures to remediate the violation and submit a written response to the CEO within 5 working days, describing in detail the corrective actions taken to mediate the violation, or a statement outlining the basis on which the permit holder will contest the notice of violation. If the permit holder contests the notice of violation, the permit holder shall keep the CEO informed of any enforcement proceedings and of the result thereof. Additional conditions of approval as appropriate. Does any member of the board have any other conditions of approval? The planning board attaches the following additional conditions of approval to the solid waste facility permit. 1, the operation of equipment during nighttime hours from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. within 60 feet of the solid waste boundary along the western sides of the expansion in cells 14, 15, and 16. Operating equipment must be limited to equipment with a combined sound pressure level of 77 decibels or less at 50 feet.
I make a motion to adopt that condition.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? Based on upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law stated above, the applicants have demonstrated that the expansion will not threaten public health, human safety, or the environment, or create a nuisance, and therefore the planning board approves the application subject to the waivers, terms, and conditions identified above as applicable, and issues this solid waste facility permit. I would like to entertain a motion to that effect.
How about not?
I'll make a motion to that effect of the decision.
I'll make a second.
We have a motion and a second.
And look at us when you vote.
All in favor? None opposed? The motion is carried. We will need to make a sign, and
We could go off the record and take a,
Enough. Enough of this. No more.
you're out of order.
You're out of order.
Okay?
Duly noted.
Contaminating of water.
You
You're
are
gonna
polluting the
contaminate
river.
water.
You are polluting the river.
Exactly when were the suggestions made by the public that were issued and made part of this record, when were they addressed in any part of your discussions?
Just answer the question.
I believe our business is completed here. Do we have any new business or old business to consider?
Not at this time.
Old business. Really, really
For every
old
single
business.
person who has put in so many hours to try to bring out the public's concerns, this whole episode tonight has been an insult.
Don't you people care about your grandchildren at all? This is disgusting. This is really, really disgusting.
I
And you're sitting
understand
here
your
going
opinion.
through
It's
this
duly noted.
and just rubber stamping what these guys want to do to this environment. It's disgusting.
The idea that this leachate is not going to poison the river is just phenomenally unbelievable that you can think that's true.
It doesn't pass the straight face test. And after all the work everybody's
We
done
have
about
considered
this
all
river.
of the comments and
That thing is like a
evidence. We have
giant
hired an engineer.
Poisonous pustule that's ready to
Entitled to your
contaminate
opinion.
your own drinking
We have
water,
followed
and you
state
don't
law.
even know it.
You are on Penobscot land.
This has been a 6-month process to get
know.
here,
We've been
and,
here.
and,
We've been here for
and this-
thousands of years.
I
We've
understand that.
protected this watershed for thousands of years.
I would add, please, that every public comment that has come to us has been put part of the record. has been a-
Bullshit. You're full of bullshit.
It's in the record, but is it paid attention to?
It's been thoroughly reviewed.
Right. And discarded.
I wouldn't say it's
Don't you people care
discarded.
about the future of this
Send a
region?
letter to the state asking what their plans are for finding alternative waste disposal sites other than Old Town.
I
This
have
was-
personally made that request numerous times myself, both on the landfill advisory committee and on the
This
board.
planning board made that request as
Okay.
part of this process.
Yes, we've made that request numerous times. Okay,
When
we have no
was it made?
authority to force the state to do anything.
I'm not saying force. When did
I
you make
do.
the request? Where is it in the record? Where is it in the record?
I don't know where it's
This
in the
is
record.
just to be trodden upon forever. We got this expansion, then we're gonna have another expansion.
I just
This
have
is
a
the future of
question.
our
I understand your
Put it on up to the
concerns.
mic.
I'm sure you do.
I
Why
do.
weren't they reflected in any part of what your discussion was?
They were. They were. They were
Nothing was
considered and
reflected
reflected.
in that,
All of
what
those
you
were.
just read. All you read was
You know,
the
we
points
can
up
continue
there.
this, you know, I know you disagree, okay? We have carefully considered all of this evidence. We live in Old Town.
How much money
We've
is
hired
going to-
engineers. We have
Because
got
of-
expert testimony on all of this, and this is the decision that we've come to.
Okay, Ted, that's enough. We have an elder here.
I have a question. It really does concern the river because it's the leachate. The leachate that we don't know what's in it. We haven't tested what's being dumped in there. And we're looking at years and years of dumping into our river. And I just have a question. How can you continue to do that if you have no idea of what you're dumping in the river and if it's being disposed of properly? We could be making it worse. And think about your children in the future. There's not going to be nothing for those children if those things leak. There'll be nothing left. You're just thinking of now and all the almighty dollar. But we got children down the road, their future. We're going to leave them toxic waste here? I'm serious. You can't go on with an expansion if this one isn't sturdy enough.
Mr. Spencer was kind enough to get a report of what is going in from the wastewater treatment plant that he has shared with us, and I've spoken with the engineer that put this together, and I'm comfortable that we aren't doing what you think, and
This is going against history. We're trying to reduce our footprint. We are trying to reduce waste. We are trying to put something like this out of business because we don't want it. It's not sustainable by our society anymore. You're moving against history. We are all doing our part to compost, reuse, reduce our use at the source. And this thing, bringing all of this stuff from out of state into our town is not acceptable. You're going against history.
The very first public meeting in the Elks Club in January of 2004 was actually after the permit was closed. The state had to look at the representative from Pierce Atwood to interpret the law because the state representatives did not know how to interpret it, and you did the same tonight. There's a explanation of some rules. Let's look over at Mr. Doyle and see how he explains it. I think that you have a responsibility to know what these rules say and not to be taking the text and the explanation from Casella.
Chairman Shiner, as a major opponent, I've spent probably 100 hours engaging with you people. At the last meeting, you asked me if I cared to propose additional conditions, which I did. They were all underlined. And I don't see how you considered even a one. No
We
discussion.
did consider all of them, Ed.
When?
We read your submission.
But you don't think it deserves a single word in public? You know, I have respect.
You had numerous opportunities.
Just listen to me for a minute.
You've had numerous
I have
opportunities.
No interrupting,
respectfully-
Ted.
I have respectfully engaged on this for years.
Yes, I
Okay?
understand.
And my conclusion is, we just can't trust our elected and appointed officials. This is pathetic. Now, good night. I've had enough.
Go
This
ahead, you
thing-
don't have to ask permission from them to speak.
I think you mentioned that there were several times when different Old Town groups had requested from the state, why aren't they looking at another place in the state? And you were ignored. You know, Old Town just did not stand up at any point in the whole process. And similarly, I feel, I listen to people testify about odors, about noise in the morning, not being able to have guests over or to plan ahead because they may have people over for dinner and, you know, a cloud of odor comes over and stuff like that. They've been ignored similarly. So, you know, this ignoring has percolated down the state to Old Town. I mean, what state has done to Old Town is just terrible.
I understand.
all of these conditions you read, where's the enforcement?
Code enforcement officer.
There was only one condition read.
What was the condition that was read?
One condition was an operation, hours of operation, but there are also several standard conditions of approval, and there are also permits from DEP. There's a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. All of those are enforceable by various levels of government.
Actually, you people are the people who live in Old Town. You're the people who understand this issue on the ground. You, the people, have taken responsibility for being the representatives of all of us in this region. And I don't think the DEP, I don't think the Corps of Engineers, I don't think anyone outside of here understands really what this is about. Nobody's on the ground and nobody's listening. This has been a project that you're shaking your head no.
That's not true.
Ed Spencer is the last person in the world to lose his patience. And he has behaved as a model citizen. And this is what we see.
And he's been given ample opportunity to present his case, and it was considered by the board.
When?
In public?
When? I didn't hear one word of consideration of anything he submitted.
It was all read. I asked if everybody had reviewed that material. They said they had. I did. I read it very carefully.
That's the end. You've read it. Goodbye. We're going to go according to the plan. That's it. That's your idea of consideration in public?
I considered all of that, and I thought it was addressed by the application, yes.
So you're the arbiter of whether something is relevant or something should be.
I'm a volunteer.
You are a volunteer.
Okay? I'm a volunteer. I've
So
done
are
my
the rest
level
of us.
best to be objective through all of this for years. For years, I've done my level best to be objective. I live a
You
mile away
understand
from
what they
landfill.
say?
I understand that. And I've tried to objectively consider the evidence and the testimony, the engineers that the city hired to review all of this. I'm a forester, okay? There are certain things I know, and other things I have to rely on other experts. And all the rest of us have our own walks of life, and that's what we did here.
Well, as a forester, you should know that the decisions that we make today impact trees, many, many years down the road. So you should understand that the decisions that you guys make today are going to have some impacts on the future generations of people living in this region. I mean, this thing is like a giant poisonous pustule.
All right, look.
It's a giant poisonous pustule.
I don't think there's any.
If you're familiar with
This, is there?
cancer,
Yeah,
with skin
this meeting's
cancer,
closed.
you'll understand.
We're adjourned.
Thank you all.
There's nothing in all of what you said that said about money. How much money